Good evening, Spokane Public Schools families and community members that might be attending this evening. Welcome to our weekly webinar on our school reopening plan. My name is Adam Swinyard. I'm the superintendent, and the purpose of this evening is to provide the most recent updates that we have relative to the start of school and the fall, and to answer as many questions as we can that you might have this evening. For those of you that have attended in previous weeks, you'll hear some of the same content, but you'll also hear this evening some additional information as we continue our planning process at the district level and continue to plan with the Spokane Education Association and take guidance from our local and state health officials. So this evening on our panel, we have Heather Bybee, who is our Chief Academic Officer, Becky Ramsey, who is our Director of Special Education. Sean Jordan is the Executive Director for Secondary Schools. Dr. Mark Anderson is our Associate Superintendent for the district. Becky Dowdy is our Director for Health Services. Jennifer Keck is an Executive Director for Elementary Education. Gwen Harris is an Executive Director for Elementary Education and Option Programs. Dr. Oscar Harris is our Director for Family Community Engagement. Ali Brera is one of our communication team members. And Rochelle Miller, who is our Executive Assistant for the district. So this evening we'll begin with an overview of updates and information relative to our reopening plan. And then, as I mentioned, we'll move into a question and answer portion of our webinar. And Rochelle, if you could grant me host privileges. So we'll begin this evening to share the most recent guidance we received from public health officials. And on Monday, we received guidance from the Spokane Regional Health District Director, Dr. Bob Lutz, that based on the current infection rates in our county, that we should begin the year in a distance learning model and provide in-person instruction to small groups. That was news that we are grieving and we're heartbroken over. We desperately wanted to open our school buildings and provide in-person instruction to our students. And that news has been very difficult for us to grapple with, as I know that it has also been really hard to hear for our families and our students. We know that in-person instruction is the best way to provide teaching and learning for our students. And we know that our schools are a hub of our neighborhoods and are a critical link for many of our students to have a positive foundational relationship with adults, access basic needs, and important intervention services. So the idea of starting the year in a distance model is not the news that we had hoped for, and we're all grappling with that. Our district has a consistent practice of following guidelines and requirements from local and state health officials on issues of public safety. We have over 30,000 students, over 4,000 staff members, and 54 schools across our city. On any given school day, we are relying on a wide range of guidance and recommendations related to safety and health that keep our staff and students safe on any typical school day. And we're continuing with that consistent practice to follow the guidance of public health officials in this circumstance. And we believe that it is not the role of a public school system to pick and choose which pieces of guidance and recommendation from our health officials we should follow. So we're continuing with that consistent practice, and that is the way we are approaching this specific circumstance relative to the guidance we received this week. It's important to note that there is an agreement in our community There isn't agreement amongst our staff. There isn't agreement amongst our families. And there isn't agreement across our community on what the best approach is in this circumstance. We're going to have to come together, be willing to understand and hear each other's perspective, be willing to look for ways to partner around our shared interests to do everything we can to provide students the best experience possible and to keep them safe. So the logic of our decision is to maintain a consistent practice of following the recommendations of public health officials. We think that is the best way to keep our students safe. And we think that that is an important approach to continue for our students and our staff at this time. In addition, the Washington State Department of Health has outlined metrics for reopening schools that we'll share this evening. And a really important aspect of that guidance is to consider phasing in to reintroduce in-person instruction as quickly as possible. So our interest is that as the conditions improve, to monitor that very closely with public health officials and begin as quickly as possible reintegrating students to more in-person instruction. And our current plan is to begin that with our youngest students. We know that distance learning is a significant challenge for our youngest students, and we know there's a significant impact to childcare. And so we will move forward as quickly as we can as conditions improve to begin phasing back in our youngest students and then move as quickly as we can to move back to full in-person learning for all of our students. The guidance we received is based on infection rates per 100,000 residents. And so the Washington State Department of Health has identified that if you have more than 75 cases, that puts you in the high risk range. And when you're in the high risk range, that's when you should strongly consider distance learning models and provide limited in-person instruction in small groups. The moderate range is 25 to 75 cases per 100,000 residents. And that's when the guidance is to utilize a hybrid model. And you'll hear a little bit tonight about the hybrid model we were preparing to implement this year, as we have planned for both a distance learning scenario and a hybrid scenario over the last several months. And then the low risk range is less than 25 cases per 100,000 residents over that 2-week period. You can see some of the most recent data of where Spokane County currently sits. We are at 214 cases per 100,000 residents. And when you look across the state, you can see the Seattle metro area, King County, at 92.6 to give you a point of reference. Again, as conditions improve, we want to do everything we can to start phasing students back into our schools. Now, Dr. Anderson is going to share a little bit about the requirements we've received from the Office of the Superintendent for Public Instruction, which is the state entity that oversees public schools in Washington, that has laid out really specific requirements for us to follow when students are in our buildings.
Thank you, Dr. Swinyard. And the State Superintendent's Office has coordinated their requirements with the Washington State Department of Health. And these are kind of the minimum key requirements. First of all, we are requiring the social distancing that you see all around the city. It's required in the classroom when kids are sitting for any length of time. So we have been actually setting up our classrooms with desks that have students 6 feet apart. Same with our cafeterias. So that requirement alone has kind of guided our planning of what grade levels we could have enough staff and students in to be able to do in-person learning every day, or if we have to do it every other day. Face mask, as you know, is a requirement. It has been made very clear by medical authorities that helps reduce the spread of COVID-19. So we will be requiring our staff, students, anyone in our schools to wear a face mask or face covering. Our teachers will be able to wear face shields when they're instructing, when they're 6 feet away from students, so that students can actually see their facial expressions. You can imagine a a kindergarten student needing, and the teacher's trying to teach them how to form letters with their mouth, they need to be able to see their teacher's mouth. Same thing with some of our students who are hard of hearing. Some students will be able to wear face shields. When we get closer than 6 feet, the mask has to go back up. Like you've seen hospital folks, they may have a shield on, but then they put their mask up when they get close. Hand washing is a requirement frequently. We are providing guidelines to staff on having students wash as they start the school day, before they go to lunch, after they come back from recess, after they go to the bathroom. And we're providing hand sanitizer stations in every classroom, office, and space. There is a screening plan required, which means that folks have to attest that their student is not sick, including taking the temperature at home. We are developing a very easy to use app for phones or laptops or computers to be able to have parents go through that app very quickly, attest that their student is okay, their student comes to school, we've already received the information. Those students who haven't attested or whose parents haven't attested about their health, we will actually do a screening at school. And then finally, a requirement is about transportation. And in that, the rules are a little different. Students can sit closer than 6 feet together, have to wear a face mask, face covering. We are working with our transportation provider to have 2 students at most per seat. 1 student is preferred with our younger students up front. Windows can be left down for air circulation until probably we get to winter. So those are kind of the minimum key requirements for when we are able to do in-person instruction in our school. We just sent this to parents today and to staff, and Rochelle, if you could give me sharing rights. This is our reopening plan, and oh, you got it there, very good. So I'm just going to walk you through this real quickly, but it covers everything about our plan, both with distance learning as well as in-school instruction. So there's a letter from our superintendent, Dr. Swinyard, to introduce it. We have a table of contents. Each of these spots on the table of contents is a hot link to that section. So if you don't want to read one section, you can go right to a section that you're more interested in. This is an overview of the plan, both for online learning, distance learning, as well as in-person learning. And then there has been a huge group of staff, parents, administrators, community members who volunteered their services. You can see all the different groups and the different subcommittees that have been working on this plan. We really appreciate their time and effort since June, meeting almost every other day, working on this plan. This is just an infographic of the plan for when we're closed, when we're open, and then if parents prefer the option of being in a virtual environment all year, there's a picture of what that looks like. So schools are closed. Dr. Swinyard talked about that, and we'll go over this in a little more detail, but explains about the program, those families that might be interested in virtual learning all year. We are going to be providing meals still. It'll be a little different than this summer and last spring. We're going to actually provide more than 1 day worth of meals, maybe a 5-day pack that parents can come and pick up. We are providing a childcare option in small groups. One is called SPS Day Camp, and we'll explain a little bit more about that. The other is a drop-in, but scheduled at various community centers, libraries, as well as our own facilities for a couple hours a day. This is especially geared for students whose internet access may not be as robust as needed. There will be an option for community-based partners, and finally our own express childcare program before and after school will continue. We're going to go over this in a little bit more detail in a bit, but here's a sample of the online distance learning school day. It's just like a regular school day. Starts at 8:30, ends at 3 for elementary and secondary with different periods. are different subjects being taught at different times. And I can answer the question already. No, students will not be on screen 6 hours a day. It will be paced so that they're on screen, then they're doing work off screen. This shows you, and I think we'll talk about this more, special education is an area that possibly, if the student needs it, in a small group, their students could come to school and receive instruction if their individual educational plan required that. Same thing in the next one with our English language development. There's a whole description of how that's going to work. Again, with some limited numbers being able to come in during the online time. Technology, we're going to check out a laptop to every student. That information will be coming to parents very soon on how to get it, where to get it, so forth, along with resources for families on how to use the current, the one platform that we're going to use, not multiple. Then, so that's technology. Here's some tips for working with your students socially and emotionally. One of the most important ones is routine, and that's what we're going to try to provide by having a regular school day. For routine, students like routines, structure, and that's what we're going to provide both on distance learning as well as in school. Then finally, extracurricular. We will not be having extracurricular programs due to health guidelines this fall. So the earliest that we would provide after school sports would be starting in December, if allowed by the health department. So when schools are open, back to that first requirements I said, instructions about face coverings, the daily health screenings, hygiene practices at school. All of these are laid out in this document. The next one talks, next page talks about physical distancing. That's the setups in the classroom, social markers where kids line up. We have a cleaning and disinfection plan for desk, high touch areas, from door handles to bathrooms, etc. And then we've increased the ventilation flow in our buildings all summer. So and we'll do nightly flushes, so our ventilation systems work well. And then what happens if there's a case or more than one case? And what will we be doing? We'll be working very closely with the health department on isolating any staff member or kid that has signs of COVID, notifying appropriate parties, possibly having to close a classroom, possibly having to close a school. We'll follow health department guidelines there. And then here's the guidance that we got from the health department on when you could come back to school after testing positive. Meals for when schools, when we're in session in schools, so there's a section there. Our elementary kids will be eating in their classrooms, sitting at their desks 6 feet apart, supervised by their teacher. Teachers will get their break through recess, giving a half-hour time for students to be outside and be able to take their mask off and stay 6 feet apart. I mentioned transportation, and then there's childcare will be available during the year, our normal express program before and after school, but we're also going to make an option, that day camp option, available for parents of 5th and 6th graders and staff who may be uncomfortable with their 5th and 6th graders being on the alternating schedule and being home every other day. So that'll be an option available for families and staff. Again, this describes how the in-person learning will work with K4 every day, grades 5 through 12 on an alternating A-B schedule. So Monday, Wednesday, every other Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, every other Friday. Talks about the distant learning, if that's the option parents choose. There's Spokane Virtual Academy is one option, and a second option for 10th through 12th graders is the Spokane online from our On Track Academy. And that's this one, the On Track Academy at home option for 10th through 12th. And then again, we've laid out how special education will work. when we're back in school, including the possibility, depending on the student, if they're 5th through 12th grade, of attending every day if needed. It's very similar to our English language development students, which is the next slide. Again, a plan for them when we're back in school for in-person instruction. And then finally, these are all hot links to additional resources that families might be interested in. Everything from how to talk to your kids about the closure, to how to teach them how to wear face masks, to Q&As about our plan. And then just released today, the very bottom one, is the Department of Health's metrics on when school can begin in person, when they would recommend that, how many cases per. And as you can see, the theme of this is we're going to have to do this together. This is tough work, and together we can do this if we work together. And it will take cooperation and understanding and flexibility, but we think we can provide kids a good program, be it online, distant learning, or in the classroom, which is what we prefer.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, and thank you again to all the members of the community, parents, and staff that have spent a significant amount of time over the last several months planning for these details and putting this information together for our students and our staff. So we're going to go a little bit deeper in a couple of the areas that Dr. Anderson referenced. And one of the things we want to point out is email communication is going to go out to families tonight, and it's going to highlight that in our distance learning model, families really have two options. That first option is to stay with their current school. So if your student attends Westview Elementary and they're a 3rd grader, your first option is to stay with your current school. And that's really if you have a preference to transition to in-person learning when it's safe to do so. This option will be led by teachers from your student's home school, and they'll stay with that teacher when they transition back. If you're a family who you're not comfortable, or you're very uncertain if you want your student to return to in-person instruction, and you just don't quite have a good feel yet for what you want to do, or you are confident that you don't want your student back in a school building until there is a viable vaccine or a viable treatment method, then Spokane Virtual Academy is going to be the best choice for you. And that's really the preference to stay virtual for the remainder of the year. So this option will be led by a Spokane Virtual Academy teacher. They'll stay with that teacher for the entire year. If at some point during the school year, that family and student decide that you're feeling better and you do want your student to go back, we'll do everything we can to accommodate a transition back to their neighborhood school, but it will be based on space available. So we'll accommodate the request as quickly as we possibly can as we have an open seat in that school in that particular grade level. So we'll do everything we can to accommodate families, but we also want them to know that it'll be based on space available if you decide to transition back to your school from the Spokane Virtual Academy. The registration for the Spokane Virtual Academy begins tonight, and families will have until next Sunday to register for that program. So please look for that communication coming from our district this evening. That communication will have links to the reopening plan that you saw this evening, as well as a link to that registration for our virtual academy for you to make that decision. I want to talk just really briefly about an overview on our distance learning model, and we learned a lot from the spring on ways to improve it. And again, there's no substitute for in-person instruction, and we're going to do the best to make this as positive an experience and as productive for our students as we can. As Mark referenced, it's a real-time school day with the teacher, a specific start and end time, specific time scheduled for each subject and period. It'll be a blend of live instruction, group work, and independent activities. We don't want students sitting in front of a computer all day looking at a screen. So teachers will be facilitating that maybe the lesson begins with 10 or 15 minutes of a live class instruction. And then the teacher may direct the student to do a scavenger hunt in their home, or work as a group, or do an independent activity, all with the teacher available at a click of a button to be available on screen for the student to support them. And then at the end of the lesson, the teacher may have another live session where bringing all the students back together for a closure activity or a reflection. We know this is going to be challenging, and it's going to take routines and habits, and it's going to take support from our staff to come alongside our students and help them be successful in this type of model. Obviously, it's a lot different if a student is off task to walk to the back of the classroom and have a personal conversation and encourage them to re-engage in the lesson. Doing that in a distance learning environment is going to be so much more difficult, particularly for younger students. But we believe the foundation of making progress in this area is having routines and structure. And we think that this routine will put us on a path to have a better experience than we did in the fall. There'll be special and elective experiences as well. We want kids to continue to have a holistic experience. Elementary students will continue to have health and fitness, art, music. Those are so important for their growth and development, and those have been a core value of our school district. They'll look different. Our teachers have done an amazing job coming up with ideas and being creative on how to deliver that content in a distance environment. And that will also be the case in our middle and high schools with our career and technical education programs that are so reliant on that hands-on experience. Our teachers are prepared to provide those flexible and creative opportunities in a distance environment, and we'll also be looking to utilize to the greatest extent possible in-person learning in those small groups coming into our schools. There'll be set times for intervention and support and for contacting teachers. Time set aside in the day for teachers to connect one-on-one in a distance or to bring students into our schools. We'll use Microsoft Teams as the consistent district-wide digital platform. We heard really clearly from families in the spring that although our district had a robust menu of digital tools and a strong foundation of devices to check out the students, that having consistency across teachers, grade levels, and schools would be an important improvement to our model, and that's a step that we're preparing to take. As Mark mentioned, there'll be laptops that will be checked out for all students, and as we have referenced numerous times already, there will be in-person instruction provided in small groups to students. Heather now is going to talk a little bit about the example elementary school day, again, with the realization that it's going to look different. It'll take some flexibility, habits, and routines, and we don't want kids looking at a screen all day long. Heather?
Thank you. Yes, as Adam said, the idea is to mimic as much of a school day as we can, knowing that it is not healthy for any of us to be on the screen for the amount of hours we have. So we've been really cognizant about trying to find the right balance. In terms of elementary, the way we see it is that school would start, and just like teachers do in the classroom, they start with a class meeting where they kind of go over the day's agenda and the plan. They usually will do team building activity or read a story, something that sets the focus and theme for the day. That's kind of how we see that morning 20 minutes starting. And then it will go into instructional time. As Adam described, there will be like a launch lesson, and then students will be released to go do some independent work or to do some partner work. The way we picture it is that there will be an indicator on the screen. There'll be warning signals that say 5 minutes, and so kids know to come back. They'll bring the groups back together, do reflection time, do extension. During those instructional blocks, they'll take breaks, go do PE, go do art, music, technology, all the things that you would have in a traditional school experience. I know in elementary it's weird to delineate by hours. That was just honestly so that it was understandable as we were trying to figure out how to divide the day. Once we get to lunchtime, we have an hour of intentional break, knowing that older students and younger students might be together going to access lunch at their local school. Then we built in time for either independent work time, depending on the student's age, or play. It's very important that our kids are playing and active and finding joy in their home environment. And then the time from 1:50 to 2:30, that is time where teachers will intentionally invite small groups back for additional learning. So that time could be enrichment, it could be support, it could be intervention. If I am an art specialist, I might be offering a special lesson at that time. So that's kind of where we see that is where teachers will reach out and have some intentional teaching with a small group. And then the 2:30 to 3 o'clock time, that is where students and parents know that they can come in and ask teachers questions in the virtual environment. So students and parents will be the drivers of that time, where the classroom teacher will be the driver of the personalized learning time. And in secondary, the times line up, it makes a little bit more sense at secondary. So the real-time advisory, so that's an advisory set every day, 20 minutes a day. Many of our secondary schools already have this format, and it is where, particularly in a large school setting, kids can find community. The classes are generally 20 or so students. And so this is where the teacher, I always said when I was a classroom teacher, this is my family. Like, these are the kids that I'm like, I'm your go-to if you need an advocate at school. This is where they'll do social emotional learning. They'll do grade checks, make sure the kids have what they need before they start the day's learning. And then it follows a bell schedule. So if my first period is math, the classroom teacher will start with their launch, their key learning for the day. There'll probably be some release time where the students are working independently or in partners, and then come back, do some debriefing together, go over what's expected either that night or for the next time that they come together. And that will just follow through, like we said, 3 periods a day. The lunch lines up with the elementary. And then independent work time. So in elementary, you saw that as play. Here, it's where we want to set aside some intentional time so that students have reviewed either their day's lessons or where they're going for the next day, so that when it's time for the student access time, they feel prepared. So they're like, oh, I know I need to go to Mr. Smith's science time because I have questions to make sure I'm ready for tomorrow. Just like in elementary, there is the real time personalized learning. Again, that is where small groups can be invited in to do some extension, intervention support to make sure that we're meeting each of the individual students' needs. The only difference is on Fridays, they see all of their classes, their shortened periods, 30 minutes a day. You're muted.
One of the things that we recognize is childcare is a significant impact to our families in a distance learning model. And as Dr. Anderson has mentioned, we have worked to develop a variety of different options. The first will be the SPS Day Camp. That will be a full day option provided for students in grades K-6. It'll be located in schools with varying capacity based on need and space available. And it's designed to be very low cost with scholarships available for our families. One of the things that we're very cognizant of is maintaining and monitoring very closely the total number of students are on site at any one time. We know that that number needs to stay small. Otherwise, it defies the logic of closing our school buildings in the first place. And so social distancing and cohorting is really important. And by cohorting, we mean keeping the same groups together and not mixing groups. Really, the opposite of cohorting is a traditional high school day where every 6 periods, kids get up and change classes and group differently. So we'll be using that cohorting strategy in this SPS Day Camp. And again, we'll be watching very closely based on the school, their space available, to make sure that we manage the total number of students on site at one time and keep that number low. Because again, the strategy of not being our buildings is we want to limit the spread to the greatest extent possible. But we also know that there's some really important strategies that we need to leverage in order to support our families during this time and our students. And that's in-person instruction in small groups. And that's also providing limited supervision for students during the day. Our other option will be an SPS Learning Center. That will be designed for 2 to 3 hour periods, a scheduled drop-in. It'll be located in district schools and community spaces. And this is an opportunity for a student to come in for 2 to 3 hours, be supervised, have structure, routine, assistance getting online. If there's challenges at home with internet access, they'll be able to connect to our network. Or if your student just does better with that additional support, this will be a good opportunity for them, and we'll be opening up these centers to the greatest extent possible throughout the community. Again, adhering strictly to safety protocols and limiting the cohort size at any one location. And then we'll also continue to work with our community partners and maintain a list on the district website of providers that families could choose. And then really quickly, we'll go over our hybrid model. So this is when our buildings can open and we start transitioning back. So it's not every kid every day, but it would be our hybrid. And we'll go through this fairly quickly. We've shared this in previous webinars, and it's part of the reopening plan document that you'll receive this evening. The general outline is K-4 students would attend every day. Again, we want to start phasing back grade levels, starting with kindergarten as quickly as we possibly can as the conditions improve. We'll have approximately 20 students per class in K-4. That's to meet that social distancing required. About 20 students is the number where we can meet that 6-foot requirement with the number of desks and the space available. Grades 5-6 would participate in an alternating day schedule. Activities and assignments would be provided for those 5th and 6th graders on days they don't attend school, and we will provide some supervised options for them in learning centers. Again, we talked about the 6-foot requirement. Specialist experience would be provided. Breakfast and lunch would be served in classrooms. And we'll really be maximizing regular outdoor breaks for kids. Because of the way we'll have to set up our classrooms, it won't allow for the group work and the movements in stations and having carpet time that help keep our kids kinesthetically up and really recognizing that developmental need of our younger learners. So we'll be building in regular outdoor breaks for them to get up, move around, go outside and get fresh air. And then we know we'll be adjusting our curriculum scope and sequence. Students have had a number of impacts over the spring, and we want to have a really thoughtful plan that we're focused on the most essential learning standards for their grade level. At secondary, it'll be an alternating schedule for in-person instruction, 7-12. That's really due to the fact that our middle and high schools have such a large number of students that attend. Lewis and Clark has almost 2,000 students. Getting 2,000 students all in the building at the same time and meeting all the safety requirements, really logistically challenging. Again, wanting to manage and maintain cohorting to the greatest extent possible. And so we're limiting the total number of students on site to really support and maintain those safety guidelines that have been provided to us. Activities and assignments will be provided for days students do not attend in person. Class sizes really built around that 6-foot requirement. The consistent digital tools we mentioned will be Microsoft Teams. CT and elective courses will be provided with flexible activities. And as we're able to, based on the guidance from health officials, we will work to restore our after-school activities to the greatest extent possible and be as creative as we can to continue to provide those to students at a distance environment. And then we've mentioned Spokane Virtual Academy. If our buildings are open, this will be an option that families can stay in, and it will include real-time experiences with teachers, consistent school days, start and dismissal times, many of the same aspects that you have heard previously. It'll also accommodate what we call self-paced and teacher-paced. So it would accommodate if a student maybe only has support and routines and just based upon the family circumstances, really working on their assignments really is best occurs outside of a traditional school day. And so we would call that self-paced, where the student is pacing themselves, working with a teacher, and there isn't much live interaction happening. So that'll be a part of that program, and we'll also have those live experiences as well for students that fit. We want this to really be a flexible experience that meets the students' needs. So with that, we know that was a lot of information that we shared. Again, families will be receiving an email this evening if you haven't already seen it in your inbox, and it will lay out the content that we've shared and include links to the reopening plan document as well as a registration link for our Spokane Virtual Academy. At this time, Heather will help facilitate questions that you have from the question and answer feature of our webinar. And our other panelists, as we're answering questions, are going to be working to type responses to as many questions as we can. We'll do everything possible to respond to everyone to the best of our ability this evening. So Heather, with that.
Okay, and I've seen a few comments from incoming K families about not receiving our emails yet. They're not in, we've just rolled over Power School, so it's just coming on board. So know that all of this information is on our website. So just to know if they haven't got an email yet, our system just turned over this last week. So first question is, I know we talked about it a little. This is one that was emailed into us early. It's about that independence. Is there something where the parent can facilitate their child's learning at their own pace? And if so, when can they expect a check-in? So they say, I sign up for the virtual academy, which would be the self-paced. How often do we check in with teachers? There's kind of looking for a little bit more detail about the virtual.
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you enroll in our Spokane Virtual Academy, and what works best for your family is really that self-paced type of structure, then the teacher will work to have those check-ins either on a bi-weekly basis or a once-a-week basis, and really build the plan based on the needs of the student. So our staff want to be as available as they can within the teacher workday. And so it's really about building a plan with that student and working with the family on when those check-ins are going to occur if they're going to do the self-paced option.
Yes, there's a question is it recommended that we check out a laptop even if we have access to one?
We're not going to require, if families already have access to a device, we won't require that they do so. We recommend it if there are any issues whatsoever on access or any types of functionality with our digital tools. The laptops that we check out come with internet filtering to make sure that kids are accessing appropriate content, and will allow us to keep really close track and be good stewards of that resource for our students and the community. So it's not something that is required. It's encouraged. That option is going to be available. When we transition back into an in-person environment, that's when your student would have a laptop checked out to them, even if they keep it at school. So really two reasons around going to a one-to-one checkout across our district. The first is we want to make sure if we're in a distance environment like we're moving into, that everybody has a device that works. The other rationale is that when we're back in our buildings, we won't be able to share equipment. And our current one-to-one model is the devices stay in the classroom, and this is particularly the case at secondary. The devices stay in the room with the first period teacher, and then every period, new students are cycling into that room. So there could be 5 or 6 students that touch a device on any one day. So it's one-to-one in that classroom, but it's shared across students as they move from space to space. And we can't do that anymore with the safety requirements. And so that would be the rationale of checking out a device when we return to in-person.
So questions for Becky Dowdy on COVID, if there's a case in the classroom, what's the protocol? Does the class get quarantined? Do the kids get sent home?
And I think Dr. Anderson touched on that a little bit on one of the slides, but we are expecting to have some very specific guidance from the health department by the time that we bring students back to the building, just because that will look a little bit different depending on whether or not the case occurs in an elementary classroom or if it's happening at high school, just because of the way that we're going to cohort the students. So more to come on that as we work with the health department.
Thank you. Ron Jordan, question about a high school student, about what classes are going to be available at their home school, and if there's any difference between the virtual.
Well, the Spokane Virtual Academy doesn't offer all of what a brick and mortar school can offer, and it would be best for that individual to be reaching out to their school's administration or counselor to get the specific information about what that school offers.
Thank you. Becky Ramsey, they have a student that was being evaluated for a 504 right before COVID, and I know I've seen some of these for IEP evaluations. Do these get put on hold till we're open, or how will that process work?
Yes. So for both 504 or IEP evaluations, as soon as school starts back up again, whether we're virtual or even virtually, so the first day of school starts those evaluation timelines. So I'd encourage anybody who was in the process of having evaluation that when we come back to school that or open virtually, that you contact your child's school to see where they are in the process.
So I'm going to give you another one. I want to make sure I get to all the ones that were emailed early. So this is about a student that has hearing loss and needs speech as well as other modifications. And so she's curious about how this environment will work for her student.
So we have over the spring and summer been gathering different accessibility features and programs that can be offered virtually for students. For example, for hearing loss, we have interpreters that can provide sign language via Zoom is the platform we've actually found that works better with Zoom. But for students who might not be able to access the virtual environment, we do have the ability to prioritize the in-person options for those students. So if your student isn't able to access the virtual environment for some reason, through the IEP meeting, we'll be discussing what the best option is. And if that is in person, we do have that option.
Thank you. Sean, Jordan, they come in pockets. If a student chooses virtual, the virtual academy, will they be able to participate in sports and activities when they're available?
Yes, with their home high school, they would, or home middle school, they would be able to do that if we have activities occurring at that time.
Thank you. Adam, there's lots of questions out there about supplies for littles. And so it's saying where we don't want screen time. We don't want 6 hours of screen time. I think parents want to be assured that we're sending home stuff, the workbooks, the handwriting, those type of things.
Yeah, so we are in the process of finalizing adjustments to our scope and sequence to meet the needs of a distance environment. And so you can anticipate that as we get closer to the school year, your student's teacher will be connecting with you to share what type of supplies and materials will be coming home in the form of consumables or workbooks. Again, as we mentioned, the lesson might start with a live session, review the activity, and then the student would have maybe 10 or 15, 20 minutes of independent work time with their consumable workbook that they are completing their assignments in. So again, we want it to be the blend. We don't want kids on the screen all day, and those supplies and materials will be a really important part of diversifying the experience for kids.
So this is the first question we received early today, first thing this morning, and it was from a mom of 4, a single mom, and wanting to know about childcare and the burden that puts on her and her family, wanting to know what's available to her and who she needs to reach out to. Dr. Harris.
Well, thank you. And I think that's definitely, even as Dr. Swinyer echoed it earlier, that is one of the key areas that we are really spending a lot of time, as well as trying to partner with community organizations about. As Dr. Anderson did mention, that we will have certain type of express programming, but we also will have the day camp. And I think we're actually working on like the surveys and different things to kind of survey the interest of parents, as well as work on parents being able to sign up for it. So more information will be coming. So please stay tuned to our website, as we will be updating it with options that's even in the community. So
thank you. Sean, I'm back to you. How can students pick classes if they're new to high school or middle school and didn't get a chance to register prior to leaving?
New students who haven't registered yet should be working with their home school, and they would be working directly with their counselor, so they should reach out to their school administration and their counselor to get that scheduled.
This question is 0 hour happening during virtual school? And the answer is yes, at least in the comprehensive school version. We're just working on putting it onto the schedule. That's true for 7th period as well. So Becky Ramsey, there's a question about an IEP student who struggles in the environment, needs redirects, other things. How can we support their learning if they're used to kind of much more smaller group instruction?
So our first kind of the first path is that we try that virtually. So this time around is going to be very different with our real-time instruction model, especially for students in special education. So they will have much more direct access with the teacher virtually, and they'll be able to provide those redirects. We can also have them connected with a paraeducator virtually who can be assisting alongside them through Microsoft Teams. And if neither one of those meet the student's need, then that's when we would look at that in-person option.
Thank you. There's questions about Wi-Fi. So last year we offered Wi-Fi hotspots. Some worked, but are we going to be offering Wi-Fi support this year?
Yeah, so we had Wi-Fi hotspots that we offered to families in need last year. We received a little under 300 requests for that support. One of the things we learned is that many of our families, even though they had access, it wasn't the quality of access needed to provide an effective distance learning experience. And so we're working with both at the state and local level and with community partners to support broader access to high quality internet. And we will have limited hotspots available for students in need again this year. And we've been really appreciative of our community partners who have stepped up and wanted to help address this issue.
Thank you. There is a question about attendance. And will students be held accountable if they have an internet glitch, which I know we've all had during this time? How will that be accounted for?
We're going to be very flexible and supportive of students if they have an internet challenge or a disruption in their routine that doesn't allow them to connect with school. We're going to be following up and make sure that they have the support that they need, because we want to make sure our kids are consistently engaging. And we are still waiting for finalized guidance on attendance from the state level as they respond and adjust to the COVID pandemic. So we're going to be flexible, we're going to be supportive of students, but we'll be following up to offer assistance and to come alongside the student and partner with the family to make sure the right interventions are in place.
This question, when will we know who our child's teacher is? That's always a question as we head into the start of the school year. Everyone wants to know who's my teacher? Who's my teacher? Do we know a time for that?
Yeah, so as we're finalizing staffing for our Spokane Virtual Academy, then we'll begin the process of adjusting to how that will impact our staffing for our elementary schools and our secondary buildings as well. And so families can expect that they will find out who their teachers will be in the weeks leading up to the start of the school year. So it will probably be a week or two before the start. One of the things that's really important to us is we're working on plans to provide opportunities for our students to meet their teachers and make that connection before the start of the school year. Last year in the school closure, there was 8 months of opportunity to build relationship and connection with teachers. That's an important part of distance learning, is that relationship. Everything in our district orbits around a relationship, whether it's in person or at a distance. And so we're working on strategies that may allow us to ensure that the families have that opportunity and students have that opportunity to meet who their new 5th grade teacher is and to make that connection.
Dr. Anderson, there's a question about, will there be transportation available to get students to the day camps or learning centers?
So we're currently exploring that with Durham, our transportation provider. So by the time we get out the information on the cost of the program next week, we should have that answered too, as part of the program.
Adam, there's questions about why not Zoom? Because in Zoom you can see everybody. And so that became comfortable. Do you want to speak to some of the upgrades that Teams is making?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. This last spring, we had some of our classrooms were using Zoom, some were using Microsoft Teams, and some were using Blackboard Collaborate. And that was some of the feedback we heard from families, is that it's really cumbersome to try to navigate multiple platforms across teachers and schools. So Microsoft Teams Live will be the tool that we use for instruction for students. And Microsoft has made considerable updates that will be rolling out over the month of August to really build Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Live meetings to fit the purpose of education. So that will include the ability to see more students at any one time on the screen, as well as other features that help support teaching and learning.
Sean, this person has a senior doing Running Start and in high school, wondering how that will affect their graduation. Will they get to graduate with their homeschool?
Yes, they will get to graduate with their homeschool.
I like to give you the one-word answers.
Thank you.
I just realized that was twice in a row. Question about preschool and how will preschool work, Becky?
Yes. So all of our preschool programs, just like our K-12 programs, will begin the year virtually. If you currently attend our ECAP programs, the ECAP program has purchased a very robust online set of curriculum that not only supports families and the students with social emotional support, as well as those pre-academic skills. And then if your student also qualifies for an IEP, you'll receive those services virtually, or again, if virtually is not, your student's not able to access those virtual services, there would be an in-person option for those.
Adam, I think you'd probably be the best to speak to this. There's lots of questions, and these came in, some of the ones that we were emailed earlier, about the training our teachers are getting to prepare for this year, kind of in comparison to what they got in the spring versus how we're really stepping up to make sure that kids are getting the best experience possible.
Yeah, so our teachers participated in a significant amount of professional development using digital tools over the last 2 years as we implemented a one-to-one model with devices in our schools. And they really built on that over the spring to improve their capacity, and they've done an incredible job of building their skill set. In the month of August, our professional development time with teachers will focus on the distance learning model that we shared this evening, making sure that staff understand how that model will work and how to facilitate it. There'll be time spent on building their capacity around social emotional learning. We know that disclosure has a significant impact for many of our students in that area, and we want to make sure our staff receive training to help assist students this fall in that area. And then our safety protocols as well, how to follow those and to understand the hand washing protocols related to masks, those areas that were referenced earlier in our reopening plan. And then we'll continue to build on the use of digital tools. So we'll train them on the model, we'll train them on the safety protocols, we'll provide training on social emotional learning, and those digital tools to support this process. So there's time set aside in August every year for our teachers to receive training. That'll be the case this year. We'll be maximizing that to the greatest extent possible and really focusing on those 4 areas.
Dr. Anderson, before we run out of time, can you address lunch and breakfast for how this will look?
So we will be providing both lunch and breakfast. When we're in the full distance learning mode, our nutrition service staff will be preparing grab and go boxes so that you don't have to come every day to school. We would have like a 5-day pack that families could take home. Because this is not federally reimbursed, it will be a free lunch program if folks qualify for free lunch, or a fee as they would in the regular school year to if they want that option. During the school year, during the in-person instruction, again, we provide breakfast and lunch, kind of the grab and go approach. Actually, the breakfast and lunch will be at elementary, delivered to the classroom. Students will sign up for which option they want for lunch, and that'll be delivered to the classroom, and that's where the students will eat. At secondary, they'll actually go through the lunch and line or breakfast line.
Thank you. And we're just at the end of time, Adam. There's been several questions from our kindergarten and first grade families. And just thinking maybe that's how we end, is talking about how to make it okay for a 5- and 6-year-old.
Breaks for our kindergarten families that your student has to start that experience this way. We know you're grieving, we're grieving. It's not what we wanted. It's not what we wanted that first day to be like. We wanted you to go out in front of the school and the excitement of that day and take the picture and pull out the chalkboard and write the sign on it and have those special memories. And this year's going to be different, and it's going to be harder. And again, we have a consistent practice of following the guidance and recommendation of public health officials. We're going to continue at this time to do that. And that's going to cause the experience for our kindergartners to not look like what we had hoped. We're going to do everything we can to make it as best as it possibly can be. And we are going to do everything we can to get them back in person as quickly as possible as the conditions improve. We know there's no substitute for in-person learning, particularly for our youngest learners. We know that it'll be challenging to build routines. I had a first grader last year, and we struggled mightily as a family, and there's 2 educators in our home. So we know this is a challenge. We're hopeful that the routines and the structures will help, and it's going to take a lot of partnership, and it's going to take everybody coming together to navigate this the best that we can, to utilize strategies, to build in interventions, to move forward together as best as we possibly can. So there's no question that this brings heartache, and we're all adjusting to that. And as soon as the conditions improve, we'll work to get our kindergartners and our youngest learners back in our schools to the best of our ability. And at this time, we've got to come together. Again, there's not agreement on where way we should go and how we should proceed, and we recognize that. And right now, we want to focus on our shared interest to do this as best as we can for our kids, to stay hopeful, to stay positive, to be a model and example to them of how a community can come together and be resilient and collaborate, even in the face of disagreement, that we as a community can respond to this in a way that models to our kids, not only in the moment, but also as they grow to face their own challenges in the future, that together, if we partner together, if we're willing to look at each other's perspectives and be understanding, and then move forward, that we can make this as best we can for our kids. So we appreciate you being here tonight and your time. We apologize that we weren't able to answer every question that was shared. We will be building on our frequently asked questions document that's currently available on our district website. So if your question wasn't answered, we'll be using the information you shared to continue to build on that document. And we'll keep communicating. So you can anticipate hearing from us weekly through email. And we'll also be providing a variety of different webinars moving forward, both on a general overview, but also on specific topics such as special ed. So we, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Be well. And we look forward to moving forward together as best we can. Thanks, everybody.